Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to our forecasts or any watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391 and get any updates to the forecast through that means as well, including any watches, warnings, advisories that we have out for the state. You can email us at the address on the bottom of the screen, or you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or on YouTube. Starting off, we do not have any watches, warnings, advisories out for the state at present, but please check the website for any updates to that, and we'll take a look now at our satellite imagery. Starting off in the southern portions, coming out of the North Pacific, we have a frontal system approaching the central and eastern Aleutian Islands that is bringing some rain, especially to the central Aleutian Islands now, but will progress over the eastern Aleutian Islands as we move later into the evening hours. And then as we look up along the west coast of the state, we can see this upper level low and trough pushing into the western portion of the state, bringing in a lot of rain to areas around the Norton Sound area and western portions of the interior, some areas in the YK Delta area as well. Taking a look now out over the Panhandle area, not a lot of major activity, but we can see some of the showers popping up there that we are bringing in some rain showers to the southern portions of the Panhandle this afternoon and evening. Then as we look out over mainland Alaska, we can see a lot of cloud cover through much of the state. We're seeing some lighter rain showers through some areas, but some of the focus is going to be on the north slope where we have enough cloud cover under the effects of the low coming in and instability up there to bring us some rain and snow in some of the locations along the Arctic coastline. So as we look in for the remainder of this evening, we do have a mix of rain and snow up there. It's warm enough along the water to have the rain and snow mix in, but as we get a little bit further away from the water towards the Brooks Range, we are seeing that being primarily snow. Upper Yukon Valley, we're going to see some rain showers up there continuing through the evening. Much of the rest of the central and eastern parts of the interior shouldn't see a lot of rain, but as we get down into the Alaska Range and places around the Copper River Basin, we are expecting to see some rain showers there. South central Alaska, outside of the Copper River Basin, should be pretty clear from rain, and then as we drop down into the Panhandle area, we are going to see those isolated rain showers in the very southern portions of the Panhandle. Along the west coast of the state, we do have rain coming in from the Kotzebue Sound area through much of the western interior, down through the YK Delta area with the slow pushing in towards the Norton Sound area. And then the Bristol Bay area going to stay a little bit protected from the high pushing in from the south for now, but we do have some rain out over the southern parts of the Bering Sea and the Pribilof Islands, bringing in some light rain showers there. And then our low coming up from the North Pacific, pushing in the front towards the central Aleutian Islands, bringing some rain to the central Aleutians, starting to push into the eastern Aleutians as well. As we move into nighttime hours, that front going to continue to push north and east, bringing in rain now to places of the Alaska Peninsula, but covering the eastern and central Aleutian Islands. Not quite to the Pribilof Islands yet, but starting to push its way into the southern parts of the Bering Sea. Will continue to progress as we move through the nighttime hours. Along the west coast of the state, our low pushing just to the east of the Norton Sound area, but still bringing rain to the YK Delta area, some other areas around southwest and western parts of the interior. As we move up the coastline, as we get close to the Brooks Range, cold enough overnight to see some snow up there. Lighter snow throughout much of the Brooks Range, and then of eastern portions of the Arctic coastline, kind of from the Dead Horse area further to the east. But as we get closer towards Barrow and further west, we are going to expect some fog to develop underneath the effects of high pressure out to the west. Then over the Panhandle area, also going to see some fog develop, especially in the inside waters down in that area. But as we go back towards the south central, not a lot of activity until we get towards the Alaska Range and areas in the central and eastern part of the interior. Some lighter rain showers expected overnight in those locations. For Wednesday, we'll start off here in the Panhandle area. High pressure starting to dominate the area. Should keep pretty nice conditions for the Panhandle area. So move up towards the south central. Some showers pushing into some areas, primarily in the higher elevations. And when we start to get into higher elevations of the mountains, a lot of that will start to transition over to snow. But at low-lying areas, expecting it to be rain. And then as we get into the interior, you're going to see some rain showers out there up into places in the upper Yukon Valley. As we get closer towards the Brooks Range, however, going to start to see that mix with snow. Other areas of the Brooks Range, especially in the central Brooks Range, expecting to see snow up there. And then eastern portions of the Arctic coastline expecting some snow as well. Dropping down through the western part of the interior, going to see some rain there. But along the west coast should be pretty void of precipitation as we have this high pressure extending out over the area from the north. And then our main frontal system pushing up into the Bering Sea now, covering the Pribilof Islands as well, with the rain extending out towards the western Aleutian Islands, all through the central and eastern, into the Alaska Peninsula, and some rain out ahead of this front pushing into the Bristol Bay area and the Kodiak Island area. Then as we look into Thursday, this front will have pushed into the southern portion of the state, starting to fall apart now, but still bringing in a lot of rain to southwest Alaska, through the Bristol Bay area, Alaska Peninsula, down through the Aleutians as well, still covering the Pribilof Islands. And then we have another low that formed off the old boundary of that frontal system, forming in the western part of the Gulf, bringing in some rain throughout the Gulf, and going to start to push off towards the Panhandle area as we move forward in time through the rest of Thursday. We are going to see some rain in areas along Yakutat area and some of the more northern locations of the Panhandle on Thursday. Along the North Gulf Coast, we are going to see some rain pushing into Prince William Sound, other locations in South Central. And then as we get into the Alaska Range further to the north, going to see some rain there. Starting to get cold enough in the central interior to see a lot of the rain mixing with snow on Thursday. And as we get into the Brooks Range, going to be cold enough for snow up there. And then along the Arctic coastline, we are expecting to see a lot of snow with some areas further to the east near Kaktovik, a little bit warmer, so expecting it to be warm enough to mix with rain and snow up there. Taking a look at our temperatures for Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, starting off in the Panhandle area, lower to mid 40s for most locations, a little bit warmer towards the Gulf and further to the south. Then in the south central part of the state, the upper 30s to lower 40s for the most part. A little bit colder there at Glen Allen, going to drop down all the way to 33 degrees Wednesday morning. In the interior, colder temperatures out to the east, dropping down just above freezing, but as we go into the western parts of the interior, the upper 30s to lower 40s there. Galena only dropping down to 39 degrees for Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Up along the Arctic coastline, though, dropping below freezing for the most part. Again, Kaktovik a little bit warmer there, only getting down to 34 degrees for Wednesday morning. Along the west coast of the state, in the Kotzebue Sound area, mid to upper 30s, lower to mid 40s or mid 30s for much of the Norton Sound area. Gamble down to 38 degrees, upper 30s to lower 40s in the YK Delta area and the Bristol Bay area. Then in the Alaska Peninsula through the Aleutian Islands, going to see primarily in the mid 40s. St. Paul going to get a little bit colder there, dropping down to 40 degrees. Highs for Wednesday afternoon, starting off there in St. Paul, 45 expected high. And then in the Aleutian Islands, lower 50s until we get towards the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit warmer there. On Alaska, getting up to 57 degrees. In the Bristol Bay area, upper 40s to lower 50s, mid to upper 40s for the YK Delta area. Seward Peninsula, a little bit colder there, only getting up into the lower 40s. Kotzebue, 45 degrees. Along the Arctic coastline, into the mid 30s for the most part. Should stay above freezing except for through the pass where they're only going to get up to around 32 degrees. In the interior, going to stay in the upper 40s to lower 50s. Then in the lower to mid 50s for the south central, with Kodiak getting up to 55 degrees, Seward 56. And then in the Panhandle area, upper 50s to mid 60s for highs on Wednesday. Then Wednesday night, Thursday morning in the Panhandle area, dropping down to the mid to upper 40s, lower 40s for many locations around south central Alaska. Anchorage getting a little bit colder there, down to 39 degrees, Talkeetna 36 degrees. And then in the interior part of the state, mid 30s for the most part, a little bit colder again as we push to the east. Eagle there at 33, Delta Junction as well. And then down in the western portions of the interior, only dropping down to the mid 30s there. Up along the Arctic coastline, we're going to drop below freezing again. Kaktovik once again staying a little bit warmer, dropping down right to freezing, but everywhere else should drop just below freezing into the upper 20s. Along the Kotzebue Sound area, we are going to see temperatures drop just above freezing. Nome dropping just below freezing, 31 degrees expected low for Thursday morning. In the mid to upper 30s for the most part for the YK Delta area. Makoriak dropping down to 40 degrees, mid 40s for the Bristol Bay area, and then upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, dropping down to the mid 40s as we get out towards the western Aleutians, 42 degrees for St. Paul. Thursday afternoon highs, we do have the Pribilof Islands getting up to 49 degrees, lower 50s to mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands. Bristol Bay area, lower 50s, upper 40s for the YK Delta area, and mid 40s around the Norton Sound area. So moving to the Kotzebue Sound area, upper 30s to lower 40s with Kotzebue at 41 degrees for an afternoon high on Thursday. Up along the Arctic coastline, mid 30s, and then as we drop down into the interior, things staying a little bit warmer there. Going to get into right around 50 degrees for much of the western interior, into the lower to mid 50s as we get into places of the eastern interior. South central Alaska going to get up into the lower 50s on Thursday afternoon. And then into the Panhandle area, we are going to see temperatures in the mid to upper 50s, with some places in the more southern locations of the Panhandle getting up into the lower 60s, with Yakutat at 55 degrees.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For the marine forecast, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather. One thing that we do want to pay attention to is a frontal system that will be approaching from the south, now bringing MVFR and IFR conditions to the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, and that's going to continue to push towards mainland Alaska as we move into Thursday. But meanwhile, Wednesday morning, we do have MVFR conditions over much of the Bering Sea, up along the west coast of the state with some pockets of VFR up by the Kotzebue Sound area and Seward Peninsula. Much of eastern interior, our western interior, is going to see IFR conditions extending up to the Brooks Range and then along the Arctic coastline with some VFR conditions as we get closer towards Barrow. Down in the Alaska Range, also going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions, but as we look through the remainder of south central Alaska and the Panhandle, should be VFR through Wednesday morning. So you move into Wednesday afternoon, a lot of the IFR conditions are going to clear up, but we are going to see a lot of MVFR throughout the Alaska Range, Talkeetna Mountains, through much of the interior part of the state, with some isolated areas of IFR as we get into eastern parts of the Brooks Range and eastern parts of the Arctic coastline. Then as we move down back into the Bering Sea, we can see our frontal system now pushing in, bringing some MVFR and IFR conditions to areas of the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Islands, and all the way out towards the western Aleutians as well, with MVFR starting to get to the Pribilof Islands. Then on Thursday morning, IFR conditions now making it to the Pribilof Islands, with IFR throughout all of the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, with MVFR conditions now extending to the Bristol Bay area and the Kodiak area. Then as we move into the mainland part of the state, much of the interior, including areas of the southern interior, pushing down into the Alaska Range, you're going to see MVFR conditions, and then IFR conditions throughout much of the Brooks Range remaining for Thursday morning. But as we move into Thursday afternoon, a lot of that over the Brooks Range is going to clear up, but still going to see MVFR conditions along the Arctic coastline and down into places of the northeastern part of the interior by the upper Yukon Valley, and then down through southwestern part of the state. Our frontal system now bringing MVFR conditions to areas around the Kenai Peninsula up through all of southwest Alaska around the Bristol Bay area, with MVFR or IFR conditions extending into the Bristol Bay area as well. And then way out over the Aleutian Islands, IFR conditions extending down the Alaska Peninsula throughout the central Aleutian Islands. As we look at the passes, starting up north, we have AKwx Pass going to be IFR throughout the day on Wednesday, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both start off IFR but improve to marginal conditions later in the afternoon. And then Rainy Pass on Wednesday will be IFR improving to marginal. Windy Pass will be MVFR throughout the day. Isabel will start off MVFR but drop down to IFR conditions. Mentasta Pass, however, will stay VFR throughout the day. Tonita will start off VFR but drop down to MVFR. And then Portage will stay VFR throughout the day on Wednesday. Chilkoot and White will both also be VFR for Wednesday. Taking a look at our freezing levels, you can see up north along the Arctic coast and through the Brooks Range, we do have surface freezing levels, some colder air up there. But as we look down Further to the south, behind our frontal system, we have some warmer air bringing us higher freezing levels up to 12,000 feet around the eastern Aleutian Islands. So as we look at our icing, we can see all above 10,000 feet for the southern parts of the Bering Sea, central and eastern Aleutian Islands, extending out towards the Alaska Peninsula. But over mainland Alaska, we do have a lot of icing out there expected above 6,000 feet down by the south central. But as we get further north into the colder temperatures, we are expecting between 3,000 and 10,000 feet up in the interior. For our jet stream, we do have a portion of the jet coming out over southwest Alaska out of northwesterly flow, 135 knots there, and then pushing out into the Gulf and dropping down to 125 knots. Far northeastern part of the state, southerly flow of the jet streak there, 70 knots expected. And then out over the eastern Aleutian Islands, we have southerly flow jet streak of 120 knots headed out of the south, and then easterly flow 65 knots out over the western Aleutians, dropping us down to 9,000 feet. Out over the Bering, strongest winds are going to be in the south out of an easterly direction up to as high as 55 knots there. Out over mainland Alaska, westerly flow 10 to 35 knots, strongest as we get over the Bristol Bay area and through the Barren Islands area. Then at 3,000 feet, westerly flow continuing 25 knots for southern portions of the state. Easterly flow up north around 20 knots there. Then easterly flow out over the Bering, highest again 50 knots in the southern part of the Bering Sea. For our turbulence, most of the turbulence is going to be out over the Aleutian Islands where we saw the strongest core of those winds. One area by the western Aleutian Islands below 4,000 feet expected there, and then out over the eastern Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula below 4,000 feet expected there as well. That will continue to push east throughout the day on Wednesday. We'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
There are some important things we can all do to avoid runway incursions. Things we probably all know, or have known but forgotten, or that we sometimes overlook because of distractions. Some of these things are simply plain old common sense. Always look, listen, and expect the unexpected. Minimize distractions by keeping a sterile cockpit while taxiing. Know where you are and where you're going. Never guess. Always know. And if you don't know or are uncertain, always ask. And that brings me to a word or two about the best ally we pilots have at Howard Airport, the air traffic controller.
Runway 25 left at Delta position and hold traffic on the downwind.
These are the professionals dedicated to leading us safely through the often complex and confusing runways and taxiways and traffic of a Howard Airport.
This is 6 Papa turning base at the 605 freeway, report turning final.
The pace of air traffic communications can be confusing, even overwhelming. We should not feel hesitant to ask controllers to repeat an instruction, to ask for progressive taxi instructions if we need them.
Narrow ground, Cherokee 32123, request progressive taxi instructions, please. November, Charlie, Bravo.
If you don't know, ask. If you aren't sure, verify.
When communicating with air traffic control, always listen before you transmit.
Cessna 3284 Delta, holding position, runway 19 right.
Also, listen to what the controller is saying to other aircraft. It can have a critical bearing on your safety. Again, maintaining situational awareness at all times is key. Be sure you understand all air traffic control instructions. If you receive a clearance you don't understand or is contrary to your position on the airport, you should verify the clearance.
Cessna 4530 Papa. Runway 19 or full length, clear for takeoff.
Air Tower, Cessna 4530 Papa. Is at Bravo 3. Verify we're still cleared for takeoff.
Cessna 30 Papa. Negative, hold your position.
4530 Papa. Holding short, runway 19 at Bravo 3.
Runway incursions occur most frequently when pilots enter or cross a runway without authorization. Typically, communication between the pilot and air traffic control is good. Pilots hear and read back hold short instructions and know what they're supposed to do.
Cessna 93018, hold short, runway 26 right.
But they cross hold short lines or taxi on the runway without authorization anyway. Always read back all hold short instructions.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
A simple "Roger" won't do. This applies to position and hold and clearances to enter a runway as well.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
We can avoid most runway incursions by reducing distraction in the cockpit while taxiing, familiarizing ourselves with our departure and our destination airports, and staying alert at all times.
Be sure to write down taxi instructions, but never do it on the move. It can be a distraction. The same is true with checklists. Conduct them while stopped, never on the move. Pilots, controllers, and drivers all rely on their eyes as their primary sensors. And the simple fact is, our eyes don't work as well at night as they do during the day. The visual acuity we lose at night, combined with inconsistent cockpit lighting, canopy reflections, and possible rain, snow, or fog, make taxi, takeoff, and landing operations that seem easy during the day a real challenge at night. Pilots should observe a few simple lighting standards that will help those around them maintain their situational awareness. When taxiing into position and hold, turn on all exterior lights except landing lights. This will make your aircraft more conspicuous to other aircraft on final. Don't turn on your landing lights until you have been given clearance to take off. If you see an aircraft with its landing lights turned on, it's a clear signal that that aircraft is moving or is about to move down the runway for takeoff. When instructed to cross a runway, turn on all lights, including landing lights. The exception would be if your lights would interfere with someone holding or approaching from the other side of the runway. Also, when you line up for departure at night, consider lining up about 3 feet to the left or right of center line, so another pilot on final can more easily distinguish your aircraft from the runway lights.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the marine portion of this show. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. Starting off way out east, we do have some ice to the north, and even though it looks like we have reached the minimum of the ice pack, we are starting to see growth in areas around the Arctic Ocean by Alaska here, so we are expecting some of this to continue to grow. As we look down at our marine forecast for the main marine areas, starting off in the southeastern part of the state, we have primarily north to northwest flow, anywhere from 15 to 25 knots out over the Gulf, strongest as we get further to the south, and the inside waters pretty similarly, north to northwest flow, strongest further to the north. Up by the Skagway-Haines area there towards Juneau, we do have around 20 knots with 3 to 4 feet seas in the inside waters. On Thursday, we have pretty light winds in the inside waters, only around 10 knots. South in the more northern locations, becoming more northwesterly in the southern locations. Out over the Gulf, we have flow 10 to 20 knots, northwesterly 20 knots as we get further into the eastern part of the Gulf, seas as high as 7 feet. For the south central locations, we have primarily westerly flow, 15 knots getting as high as 25 knots out over the Gulf, strongest further to the west. Westerly flow on the western side of the Barrens as well, around 25 knots there, but in Cook Inlet, southwesterly flow 10 to 15 knots. Seas around 5 to 6 feet in most locations. Then on Thursday, we have flow switching up, becoming more southerly or easterly, strongest again by the Barren Islands, southeasterly 25 knots there. In Cook Inlet, becoming northerly 15 to 20 knots, and then in Prince William Sound, easterly flow 15 knots there on Thursday. On Wednesday, out over the Alaska Peninsula near Kodiak Island, different kinds of flow. We have southerly flow becoming easterly for locations around the Alaska Peninsula as high as 25 knots, strongest to the west. Bristol Bay area, only around 10 knots there. But as we get closer to Kodiak Island, we have flow from southerly becoming southwesterly, 15 to 20 knots there. Then on Thursday, we have flows still coming out of that southerly direction for the most part, becoming southwesterly near Kodiak, around 20 knots. And in Shelikof Strait, we have flow starting to switch over and become more northeasterly, but through much of Thursday, that should still be easterly flow around 20 knots. And as we look out over Bristol Bay, easterly flow 25 knots there, and southerly flow as we get further to the west 20 knots. Out over the Aleutian Islands, starting off with the westerly Aleutians, we have this Easterly to northeasterly flow becoming northerly 30 to 40 knots out over the western Aleutians and central and eastern Aleutian Islands. Seen south to easterly flow there, 25 to 35 knots, strongest on the Bering side of the islands. Then on Thursday, south to southeasterly flow by the eastern Aleutian Islands, 20 knots there, becoming north to northeasterly for the central and western Aleutian Islands, 20 to 30 knots, strongest as we get further off to the west. Along the west coast on Wednesday, northerly flow 15 to 20 knots along the northern locations of the coastline, but as we get towards the Pribilof Islands, easterly flow 35 knots there with 9 feet 4 seas. Then on Thursday, still that north to northeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots most locations, stronger again by the Pribilof Islands, 30 knots on Thursday. Along the Arctic coastline, starting off on the west coast side of that, we do have 10 to 20 knots, getting pretty weak by the Point Lay and Wainwright areas. And then as we get out towards the eastern part of the Arctic coast, we do have northerly flow around 10 knots, 4 to 5 feet 4 seas. On Thursday, that flow becoming easterly as high as 20 knots in the eastern locations. And then as we get down the west coast of the state, becoming more north to northeasterly, 15 to 20 knots there, seas 4 to 6 feet, strongest as we get closer towards the Bering Strait. Quick recap of our weather for tonight. We have a frontal system pushing into the southern part of the Bering Sea and bringing rain to the eastern Aleutian Islands, central Aleutian Islands, and out by the Alaska Peninsula. We have an upper level low pushing in with its trough into western parts of the state, bringing rain to the southwest Alaska, western parts of the interior, and up near the Seward Peninsula. Isolated rain showers out ahead of that low over much of the interior, and then snow in the Brooks Range and along the Arctic coastline from Dead Horse east. From Barrow to the west, we do have some fog up there underneath the effects of high pressure. South central area, not a lot of activity until we get up by the Talkeetna Mountains and Alaska Range, where we'll see some isolated rain showers. Higher elevations could see some snow up there. And then in the Alaska Peninsula, we are going to see some fog develop overnight. Then on Wednesday, that should all clear out for the Panhandle, being pretty nice weather there. Down in South Central, on some of the more northern locations, Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, expecting to see some isolated rain showers. In the Alaska Range as well, through much of the interior down to northern locations of Southwest, such as the Middle Kuskokwim Valley. We are going to see some rain, but that's going to be snow over the Brooks Range and along portions of the Arctic coastline. With Alaska weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.